Today, I'm going to be doing a lesson on if it's okay for individuals who say that they believe in the Bible to use profanity, indecent language, cursing, whatever you want to call it. The answer to that question is no, it is not okay. And we're going to use the King James Version of the Bible, the Old Testament, and the New Testament to prove this. The opening scripture will be Romans chapter 14, verse 13, and it reads, "Let us not therefore judge one another anymore, but judge this rather, that no man put a stumbling block or an occasion to fall in his brother's way." So when you look at profanity, it is a stumbling block. Because if you're in the truth and you're trying to explain something to someone that's not in the truth, and you're using profanity, or if they see you on the streets and they come up to you and you're using profanity, they associate that with something negative, because it is. And we're going to prove in the scriptures that we are commanded not to use curse words, not to be swearing. The next scripture we're going to look at is Proverbs chapter 4, verse 24. It says, "Put away from thee a froward mouth and perverse lips. Put far from thee." James chapter 3, verse 9 to 10. "Therewith bless we the Father, and therewith curse we men, which are made after the similitude of the Almighty. Out of the same mouth proceeded blessings and cursing. My brethren, these things ought not to be so." So you can't bless and curse, use profanity with the same mouth. I know people try to say that cursing in the scriptures is not talking about that. It's talking about like when you curse someone and they end up having a bald head or whatever the case might be. But in the context of these scriptures, it's talking about swearing or profanity. Next scripture we're going to look at is James chapter 2, verse 10. It says, "For whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet offended in one point is guilty of all." So some people might try to downplay it and say, well, it's just words. It's not that important. It's not that serious. But we're going to find out here in Matthew chapter 12, verse 36 to 37, that we will be judged by our words. So words are very relevant. Matthew chapter 12, verse 36. "But I say unto you, that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned." So when you tell another brother or another sister to go and F yourself, you're condemned. Because why would you go and tell somebody that? What's the point? What? You feel better when you insult somebody else? Just keep your mouth quiet. Hold your tongue. Keep the peace. Next scripture we're going to look at is Proverbs chapter 10, verse 31 to 32. It says, "The mouth of the just bringeth forth wisdom, but the froward tongue shall be cut out. The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked speaketh frowardness." So these people don't even know what's acceptable because, well, clearly based on the scripture, they're not righteous. And a righteous man we know keeps the commandments. If you look at Deuteronomy 6 and 25, it explains to you what righteousness is. So one of the commandments is to put away these idle talks and your impure speech. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 32, it says, "The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked speaketh frowardness." Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1, "A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words store up anger." And we see it all the time when people get in these heated debates to the point where they want to get physical. Nothing is wrong with holding your peace. If someone doesn't see eye to eye with what you're saying, you don't have to go and transgress and use unclean words and communication to get back at them, to make yourself feel better. Next scripture we're going to look at is Titus chapter 2, verse 6 to 8. It says, "Young men, likewise exhort to be sober-minded in all things, showing thyself a pattern of good works, in doctrine, showing uncorruptedness, gravity, sincerity, sound speech that cannot be condemned, that he that is of a contrary part may be ashamed, having no evil thing to say against you." So the scriptures are telling us to have sound speech that cannot be condemned. Because when you're on the streets using this profanity or in private, wherever you are, and people see these things, and you try to go and talk to them about the Bible and the commandments, they're not going to want to hear you, because they're going to bring that up and say, hey, you're using profanity. Why are you talking to me? So you're condemned by your words. Because it says here, he that is of a contrary part may be ashamed. So the person who is not in the truth, you're going to put them to shame because they don't have anything to say against you. But you keep giving people ammunition and things to use against you when you're trying to reveal to them the truth. 1 Timothy chapter 4 verse 12, it says, let no man despise thy youth, but be thou an example of the believers in words, in conversation, in charity, in spirit, in faith, and in purity. Next scripture, Ephesians chapter 4 verse 29. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but that which is good, to the use of edifying, that it may minister grace unto the hearers. So it says, let no corrupt communication, none whatsoever. So if you're speaking with somebody and you tell them to go and F themselves, that's corrupt. How could you tell somebody else that? What's the point? In addition to that, I've seen camps out there who would say, nobody can F with our camp. We're the best camp. What kind of scriptures are you using to justify behaving like that? Next scripture we're going to look at is Colossians chapter 3 verse 8. It says, but now ye also put off all these things: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy communication out of your mouth. Next scripture we're going to look at is James chapter 1 verse 26. And it says, if any among you seem to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is in vain. So if you don't bridle your tongue, if you don't control your tongue, your entire religion is in vain. All the laws that you're keeping, it's in vain. That's what the scripture says. I'll read it again. James 1:26. If any man among you seems to be religious, and bridleth not his tongue, but deceiveth his own heart, this man's religion is in vain. So you should be able to control your tongue, because if you're not able to control it, that means you have to be possessed, because somebody else is controlling it for you. I'll even give people a challenge and say, well, look, don't use profanity for a week. And they can't do it. They can't do it because they're possessed. Somebody else is controlling them. Some people would say that it's okay to curse and to use profanity because it's in the Bible. So we're going to read that scripture to see where they're coming from and debunk it. Matthew chapter 26 verse 72 to 74. It says, and again he denied with an oath, I do not know the man. And after a while came unto him they that stood by, and said to Peter, surely thou also art one of them, for thy speech betrayed thee. Then began he to curse and to swear, saying, I know not the man. And immediately the cock crew. So people try to use this scripture and say, well, see, we have somebody in the Bible that's using profanity, they're swearing, and says he began to curse and to swear. Now that's just ridiculous, because how are you going to use an example of a man who just betrayed the Messiah to try and say that this is what we're supposed to do? That's who your role model is? A traitor? That makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. We can't get up today and say, well, okay, we can do that because it's mentioned in the Bible. Just because somebody is doing something, that has nothing to do with it. What does the scripture say? It says if you don't bridle your tongue, your religion is in vain. It says that the mouth of the righteous knows what is acceptable. That's what it says. Let's just close off with this scripture. Ecclesiastes chapter 12 verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the entire matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the duty of man.